More than half of all refugees around the world are under 18 years old. If the global refugee crisis is ignored, the problem will only get worse. It may seem to many people that there is nothing they can do about it personally, so why bother? But that is exactly what inspired us to get involved. As young people, we are raising awareness of this issue because the crisis is not going to solve itself in your generation. It may not even be fixed in ours. The repercussions will most likely be handed down to our children's generation. We are brother and sister working to spur action to help displaced people around the world. As teenagers, it is not our fault that the situation exists, but as global citizens of any age, it is, at some level, our collective responsibility to fix. Not because of any personal obligations, but because this issue affects the world that we all share.
According to the United Nations, nearly 71 million people have been forcibly displaced from their homes due to war or persecution as of the end of last year. We started raising awareness about the global refugee crisis 2 years ago, and 6 million more people have been displaced since that time. That equates to one person becoming a refugee every 2 seconds. Every 2 seconds. That is more than 40 people since the beginning of this talk, and well over 500 by the end of it. Our parents are documentary photographers and independent advocates. Working alongside them, we are freelance student journalists and photographers. We document refugee camps and displaced people around the world. Now, as young people, we knew that there were millions of vulnerable individuals seeking safety from violence. But what we couldn't understand was why these displaced men, women, and children were being demonized for political purposes. We wanted to understand the situation by seeing it for ourselves.
We want to share our perspective from two very different, but in many ways similar, situations. In Greece, we met with people fleeing violence and persecution from Syria, Iraq, and other countries. In Mexico, at the Tijuana US border, we documented the so-called Migrant Caravan of thousands of people fleeing violence from Honduras and elsewhere. Alexander and I have to believe our world is fundamentally kind. We have to believe that there are more people in this world, people just like you and us, who want to help each other rather than hurt each other. We want to celebrate all that we share in common and understand and appreciate all the things that may be different. We believe diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. We're not naive, though. We recognize that the world can be challenging, often difficult, and we have to approach everything we do thoughtfully and carefully. We know to be cautiously optimistic about the world, but we never want to be afraid of it.
In Greece, we were on night patrol with the Hellenic Coast Guard as they searched the Aegean Sea. We documented refugee boat landings on beaches, and we interviewed people detained at refugee camps in Athens and Chios. We'd like to introduce you to some of the people we met. Just a disclaimer, a few of these images are a bit graphic, so look away if you don't feel comfortable. But we don't sugarcoat the situation. Many of these images are disheartening. Greece is a hotspot for refugee boat landings. Since 2015, over 1 million men, women, and children have crossed the Aegean Sea, departing from Turkey, seeking safety in Greece. The Greek government and citizens have shouldered the enormous responsibility of handling this issue with questionable international support. This is the Suda refugee camp on Chios Island. Chios is about 5 miles from the Turkish coast and a hotspot for refugee boat landings. There is another camp on this island called the Vial refugee camp. We cannot show you photos, however, because it is located on a military base, and when we were there, we were explicitly warned by police and camp authorities that if we took photos of the camp or facilities, we would be arrested immediately. What we saw, however, was extremely discouraging. There were not nearly enough resources to support the thousands of people detained at the camp. Many were forced to live in the streets, and Vial is not a standalone situation. Inhumane living conditions are the norm for many refugees around the world.
The man with the white hair and beard is Yusuf. Yusuf had fled Syria and been living in the Suda camp for a year when our team first met him. The Suda camp had been attacked and firebombed by nationalists on multiple occasions. Yusuf shared the next video and photo with us.
هذا الحريق كم كيوس في جزيرة كيوس السوداء، مظاهرات وحرقوا الكم.
Attackers threw rocks at the camp from cliffs above and set tents and storage facilities on fire. Refugees have to learn the hard truth that they are still not safe upon reaching a new land, even when they are supposed to be secure under the protection of local and world authorities. Early one morning, before dawn, we received a call that a boat was landing on Komi Beach in Chios. We grabbed our camera gear, got in the cars, and went to the southern tip of the island. What we found were 40 people huddled on the sand who had made the treacherous trip from Turkey. 13 men, 13 women, and 14 children, primarily from Iraq and Somalia. Refugee boat landings in Greece are considered crime scenes by the police, so access to the landings are usually restricted, and unauthorized observers could be arrested for trespassing. We were granted advance approval to document the boat landings. A lot of the world has stopped paying attention to this crisis, but it is still going on. That morning, our team was the only journalists there.
Refugee smugglers often overload small, inflatable boats with as many people they can squeeze in because they make more money that way. This rubber boat was designed to hold perhaps about 20 people, but it held twice that number, making the already dangerous ocean crossing even more treacherous. And what's more, many of these refugees were wearing counterfeit life preservers that would more likely drown them rather than save them if they fell in the water. As teenagers, sometimes it is easy to take a few things for granted, like family, safety, education, and the promise of a productive future. This same dream was shared by many other young people around the world before their lives were uprooted and they had to flee their homes for safety. In refugee camps, we met teenagers and young people who had not had access to education for years. Their lives were interrupted by war or persecution, and now millions of people are living in plastic tents on the dirt. Millions of people don't have access to basic human needs, let alone school books and education.
This is Mohammed, and we'd like to tell you a bit of his story. Mohammed lived in Iraq and worked for a large international company as a driver. One day, he started to receive threats from ISIS. They wanted him to stop working at the company because it was foreign and they didn't like that. Mohammed has shared the next two photos with us. Please be aware that you may find them disturbing. One day, he and his brother were attacked by ISIS. His brother was shot and killed, and Mohammed sustained a head injury in the attack. He had no choice but to flee Iraq to save his life. After he fled, that same group set his family's house on fire. His family was forced to go into hiding as well. Mohammed has been waiting years for his asylum application to be considered and is still waiting.
We went to Tijuana, Mexico, because we were hearing about a growing humanitarian crisis at the border. But there were so many different opinions about what was going on that we wanted to learn about it directly. The so-called Migrant Caravan is comprised of tens of thousands of people fleeing violence, primarily from Honduras. This was the Baratal refugee camp in Tijuana. It was previously a dance hall and was turned into a makeshift refugee camp. Thousands of people were relocated from the Mexico-US border and were being housed in inhumane conditions here. There is so much argument and so little progress about this issue. We know that people do not leave their homes willingly. We must not forget that. It is sometimes easy for people to assume that others living in bad or dirty situations are bad or dirty people, but this is simply not the case. The propaganda we are hearing reminds us of false accusations made against other groups in the past. These men, women, and children are being demonized, and that makes us angry. After all, what is the point of us studying history at school if we are not going to learn from it?
Like many overcrowded places with no sanitation or medical support, the risk of disease and outbreak is rampant. At Baratol, because thousands of people were crammed together in a space not intended for people to live, with minimal support, sanitation, or medical services. We were instructed to wear surgical masks and gloves because of the growing risk of typhoid, tuberculosis, and even cholera threatening the people. The vulnerable people detained here were under constant threat. The camp was located in an area plagued by severe local crime. Women and girls are especially at risk to the countless dangers when fleeing their homeland, as well as detained in a new camp or country. The problems the world is facing today can seem overwhelming at times, and very often they are, but we try to remember that helping even one person can make a difference.
Each and every one of us here has an incredible gift. We all have the gift of a voice, and we have the opportunity to use ours on behalf of those who have had their voices taken away. As individuals, maybe we cannot prevent the displacement of others, but we can certainly decide how we conduct ourselves and how we respond to these situations. Someone once asked why we are so committed to raising awareness about this issue, and the answer is simply because we don't want anyone to say that they didn't know. At a minimum, we ask that you stay informed about what is going on today. Taking that further, you can use your voice to raise awareness in your own circles. You can also donate your time, money, and resources to groups that are making a difference locally or around the world. Don't be afraid to reach out to your legislators and let them know you want our country to do its fair share in addressing this crisis. In a world with so much abundance, we don't think that it is too much to ask to share some of that with people who have lost so much. Thank you.